you. Hello everyone again. I had a chat with our panel members over lunchtime, and the overwhelming consensus was that panel presentations of this sort are best when we try to facilitate a discussion with the audience as much as possible. So, in a moment I'm going to introduce the panel. I have got some questions, obviously, because I did do some preparation. And what I would like us to do is to maybe spend no more than half our time with the prepared questions and at least half the time with a discussion between yourselves and the panel. Would that be okay? So would you please store up your questions so that when we get to the point in the proceedings where it's your turn to ask questions that I'm inundated with hands, that will be absolutely brilliant. Thank you. So on the panel today we've got three superb people. We've got Abigail Demoria, who is the Chief Executive of Music Futures, a global movement that transforms, engages and inspires people through real-world learning. I'm sure everyone must have heard of Music Futures. Have you had any area heard of Music Futures? There you go, Abigail. No problem at all. Your message is getting out there. Fantastic, well done. Now we've got Lee Hughes, Professor Lee Hughes, who is the Director of the International Centre of Community Music here at York St John's. He's also the President-elect of the International Society of Music Education and is the past Chair of the Commission for Community Music Activity. As a community musician, he's worked across the education sector, within healthcare settings, prison, probation service, youth and community and adult education. So we're really delighted to have you here on the panel. Thank you. And we've got Missy. I don't know what your surname is. I'm so sorry. Missy Mills. I do apologise, Missy. Missy's a digital innovation strategist. She works across music education and qualification design, including leading on teacher development at Trinity College, and is also involved in the leadership of the Music Education Hub. She currently leads on digital development projects at the Royal Opera House in London. So, could I ask you please to welcome your panel? Fantastic. So, the first question, which I'm going to ask Lee to start with, is, Lee, what makes for a good online teacher or music leader?
Okay. Thanks very much for being here, and it's been great. I mean, I haven't got loads of experience in terms of working on the online platforms, and that's how I've learnt loads today. And I've just jotted down a few things, 3 things in fact, with the kind of idea of being reasonably brief on these panels, what we're going to say. And the first thing I jotted down in the corridor out there just after lunch was a kind of belief. So in terms of what makes somebody sort of effective, let's say, in an online platform, drawing upon my experience, would be belief in the power of the technology being a force for good. So in my experience, if that isn't there, if there isn't a kind of belief in it being really useful, that's a kind of a problem. So belief was the first thing I got down. The second one from my experience was a recognition that the technology you was engaging in as a music leader or a music teacher was another mode of interaction, another mode of teaching and learning, or engaging people in teaching and learning transactions. It wasn't a replacement for what you potentially may have been more used to. Although, of course, digital natives would be just completely used to those environments. So I'm speaking from a perspective of myself and other music leaders I've worked with who maybe wasn't brought up in the sort of digital world. So a kind of recognition that's another mode of interaction. And the other thing was, I've heard it said today, preparation, advanced preparation. So in terms of being an effective person working on online environments, from my experience, was this idea of advanced preparation. And for me, often the preparation that I needed to go to do, and those that I know working in these environments, is quite often different. In some senses I might say more, but certainly different than if you were working in other types of spaces. So advanced preparations. So belief in the technology being a force for good, a kind of recognition that it's another mode of interaction, not a replacement, and a real sense of advanced preparation. Knowing the gear you are using is certainly one thing, but I'm talking about content and thinking clearly about how you're going to communicate. So that's my effort.
Thank you, Lee, that's great. Abby, in terms of Musical Futures work, you're working regularly with many teachers across the UK and abroad as well. What do you think would be the key requirements for a good online music teacher?
Thank you. I mean, as Alan put this really well this morning, good teachers need to become great teachers in an online environment. And I think what we see a lot is that there's great teaching and there's poor teaching. And no matter what, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's online, we're still going to be faced with the same sorts of issues around quality in terms of good teaching and learning. And I think we mustn't lose that in an online environment. But I think that there are some really subtle implications here for professional development, because what you lose with an online platform is some of that ability to read your students and to read who you're working with in terms of body language and in terms of some of the really fine communication skills that a great teacher has. They can pick up on exactly what their students are needing, what they're thinking, how they're reacting to what they're learning. And so I think that there are implications for professional development here, and I'd be really interested in how this can operate on a classroom level as well as on a one-to-one teaching level, because I think that classroom teachers have so many skills that they can bring to the table in terms of online learning. But it's just really looking at some of these communication skills that I think are so critical that are going to be needed.
Thank you very much. Missy, you're involved in leading or working with the leadership of music education hubs, I believe. Can you tell us which hub it is that you mainly work with, please?
It's actually a previous position.
Okay,
I
sorry.
was with Sound Hub in Kent.
Okay, brilliant. So in that context of music education hubs, particularly in music services, let's say, what do you think would be the key requirements to implement an effective online music teaching system?
I think it's not just within this sector. I think it's quite wide, and a broad misunderstanding of what technology and what technology can do. And I think I always like to use the analogy of saying that there's not a head of electricity anymore, and I might be putting myself out of a job here, as digital is in my title. But I think that there's a misunderstanding. A number of meetings that I've sat in where people have said, let's do an education project and add some digital on the end. And digital is a tool, and it's enhancing learning outcomes. And I think relationships between hubs and schools are very important, and hubs understanding the huge requirements that are made on teachers and schools and pressures, and helping to soothe that relationship and create easy ways into technology. And I think that's why organisations like NYMAZ are fantastic at kind of demystifying the white noise around technology that is quite overwhelming in the sector at the moment.
And in terms of community music, Lee, what lessons have we learnt so far about the effective implementation of these systems within that particular sector?
Yeah, community music's its key points might be around bringing people together, participation, inclusion, certainly diversity, and such like. And I think this idea of belief for me. I think technology can facilitate a range of those things, and I think the Connect Resound project, which we heard about today, really demonstrates that. So if used effectively, and again, connecting with what Abby's saying about, we can provide some good training or some good education and present some expert practice. We heard Catherine Jefferson talk about some of that on screen there. I think the possibilities are really target those very things community musicians have been sort of banging on about for the last 3 decades, this idea of inclusion. I mean, in terms of working online, as pointed out, the International Journal of Community Music, a couple of years ago we had a guest editor work on something that was targeted around using YouTube and a lot of online practice and that. So if people want a view of some of the things that have happened in different countries, that issue of a few years ago has a number of interesting articles people might be interested in looking at.
Fantastic, thank you Okay. Thank you very much. Right, now we've focused on some positives and we've looked at the affordances and the benefits that this type of approach might have. But I think in several of the presentations today we've been reminded, haven't we, that technology isn't the answer all the time and it needs to be engaged with in a constructive way, with a full awareness of the benefits and the potential limitations as well. So I wondered, panel, what do you think might be some of the barriers or some of the concerns or the limitations of these types of technologies, maybe at the moment and maybe looking forwards over the next few years as well? Abigail, do you want to have a crack at that one?
I mean, I'm coming particularly from a school's perspective, and there are clearly issues in many schools with just literally with bandwidth and with being able to get on the Wi-Fi and to be able to do something reliable. I've spoken to a few teachers about this, and they have a real fear of doing anything live because there's so much potential for things to go wrong. You have a group of students, and you can't get online, and everything crashes, and then it all comes on in the last 5 minutes, and then they have to go. And so I think there's a way to go. I don't think that there's a lack of will from teachers. I think it's more the infrastructure within schools isn't supporting this yet. It should do, but it doesn't. And I think that and this is just my own opinion, this isn't based on fact, but I think that there will be, and there is, a lack of trust in what the quality of the experience can be. And I think that will be a barrier that will come forward, or how can it possibly be as good as a face-to-face lesson? But I just like to bring everything back to the young people, and kids are accessing expertise through technology all the time. Millions of children every day. They've got access to some of the best guitar teachers, some of the best piano teachers. They can go onto YouTube, they can get a tutorial video. So I think it's more a question of what can we add by actually having that live interaction, and it is the personalised experience. Ofcom released a survey last year. 90% of 16 to 24-year-olds now have a smartphone. This is what they're using. So I think it's just when you formalise it and you put it into a school environment, how can we really do something that makes it better for the young people? So I think there's more sort of issues around. I mean, there's always going to be issues around the technology and approaching it, and it will frighten some teachers and others will completely embrace it. But I think it's a bit of a mindset thing around this notion of quality and trust, and how we can put young people absolutely at the centre of this, because they own this so much more than adults do.
Thank you very much. Missy, maybe could you tell us a little bit about the work that the Royal Opera House is doing in this area, and in particular how you might look at the pros and cons of using a digital set of tools or ideas within the work that the Opera House is doing?
Yeah, I think just picking up on what Abby said, addressing the gap between a digitally native child and a teacher who's new to this kind of technology is a real challenge for the sector, more widely than just music education. And so what we are doing at the Opera House is increasingly becoming about national projects. I think a place like the Opera House, which is a venue and it creates barriers of its own to access, has a real opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that high quality art is accessible to all, following the Arts Council mandate. So we do a lot of live screening, we do lots of cinema performances which are accessed by over 1.5 million people a year. We bring people into the Opera House, but our focus is more about getting the Opera House out. So one of the big technological builds that I'm doing at the moment is an open educational resource bank. So in addressing that gap, what we feel is really important is peer review and harking back to the kind of white noise that is around technology and the products. I went to Betfair this year and I noticed that Betfair is a trade fair for educational technology, and found that there's a 50% increase in the amount of stands, and I can imagine that teachers and hubs and anyone within this market is kind of overwhelmed by all the stuff, and making choices is quite a confusing place at the moment. And I'm really encouraged to see that there are people like Nesta that are creating peer review platforms for teachers to talk to teachers, other teachers, about what works for them in practice in the classroom. So our OER bank is something that actually Amazon is also about to do, and it's kind of quite innovative technology at the moment, and what that enables us to do is to make sure that our resources are accessible and are picked up by search engines around the world. So for instance, in practice what that means is if I'm teaching the French Revolution to my students and I type Bastille into Google, I'll get a ton of links about the band and its latest performances and the latest track and all that kind of stuff. What I want, obviously, is stuff to do with the French Revolution. So what these search banks will enable us to do is to create tailored searches that are only for educational resources. So we're about to publish our data fields. We believe in open data, making things accessible. We're publishing an open API, which means that technology companies can integrate with our resources and make it more accessible. So making it easier to access and clearer on how to do so.
So having really good content is one thing, but it's got to be able to be found by people, hasn't it? And obviously the Royal Opera House is a very strong brand in and of itself, but maybe people's first instinct isn't to equate it to education. So it sounds like you're doing some very valuable work there. Right, I've got one more question and then we're coming to you lot. So I hope you've got your questions ready. I just wanted to ask, and this, call me, I don't know what you should call me. I'm not obsessed with money, but money clearly is an issue in this, isn't it? Let's put our cards on the table. Funding for music education is scarce. It's been cut year on year. And we need to make the best use of the resource that we have. That would be a really important principle, wouldn't it? Music education hubs are dealing with public money. They're accountable to the Arts Council. We know how that structure works. Is this type of approach the best use of the money that we've got at the moment, do you think? Who would like to start with that one? Oh dear. Shall I go to the audience? We've got lots of representatives here from different music education hubs. I've met my new friend Hugh from Surrey over there, and we've got loads of others as well. We've got the guy from Darlington, sorry for not your name. Mike, lovely to meet you, Mike, as well, and loads of others. Can we have some reflections from you guys, maybe, around the issues of funding and how this type of approach might impact on the work that you're doing in music education hubs, positively or negatively? Any ideas? Anyone like to start us off? If not, I'm going to have to do it as a chair of trustees for a music education hub. Thank you so much, Anna. There you go.
I'm a secondary school music teacher. I teach in special needs school at the moment. Just a thought. Obviously, there's lots of pressure on music education at the moment, funding cuts and timetable pressures to on music. So there's a lot of pressure. But what I am noticing is digital education is kind of rising, and popularity of it among head teachers and education in general, I think it's generally on the rise. So I think it's quite a smart move for music to hook up with digital education and jump on that bandwagon, because if that's rising in popularity in the education kind of ideals, then surely that's going to provide more funding for music education, maybe? Instead of it being a negative.
Could only hope. Thank you very much. Thank you for the positive tone you've adopted there. That's great. There's my new friend at the back there.
I think it's like everything, isn't it? In terms of the funding, it's what we're using the funding for. And I think it's very tricky. We need to make sure, obviously, in terms of the point about the Arts Council DFE, we need to represent that actually what we're doing. A is quality for teaching and learning, and B is value for money. I mean, one anecdote we can actually share, obviously, to mention is the Halle performance we did. We had the entire Halle Orchestra came up to perform at Darlington. With that, we had 700 pupils from Darlington performing live with the Halle. But with the relationship we've got with NYMAZ and You Can Play, we then streamed that into 90 schools. So the peers who actually were playing, they could watch back in the schools. We had instances where an entire primary school watched their peers playing. As a result, I reckon that's about 2,700 pupils engaged with that concert outside the pupils actually in the room. So I think the digital platform allows us that breadth. I'm not suggesting that's deep learning, but from that, even from a superficial angle, and some more people want to engage with music further, and it's representing music education, high profile. As a result, we've got profile on sort of Look North and things as well across that week. So by using digital, it can actually enhance what we're trying to achieve for all of us to actually get the best possible teaching and learning outcomes for our pupils.
Thank you very much, Mike. That's great. Do we have any more reflections? Oh, fantastic. Thank you.
I think just on costs, technology transforms every industry. ultimately, and music education won't be any different. And I think the way to look at technology is that it creates additional capacity. And I think you would look at technology spend as you would any other spend. If I have a workforce, if I can spend a certain amount of money to raise productivity, if you like, or in teaching terms, maybe I can have a teacher teach more children if I incorporate technology, then I'm actually reducing my cost of teaching on a per child basis. It's straight kind of economics, as long as the quality is the same. That's the big question. So if you can guarantee the quality, then it's unarguable, as far as I can see, that it's going to add value. Particularly on the online teaching side of things, I think I've worked with lots of music clubs, and if you're a music club spending £300,000 a year on travel expenses, then you might look at technology as a way to save that, and what can you then do with that money in other parts of your organisation. So I think there's no question about the value of good technology, and you just look at it like any other aspect of the resource of an organisation. How can I make it as effective as possible?
Thank you very much for that. Right, we've got one more comment at the back. Oh, two more comments at the back, and then we're going to ask for your questions, I promise. So can we be brief with these comments if possible? Thank you.
I come from the amateur musician side, but I was an insurance broker before I retired a couple of years ago, and it always used to upset me greatly when I was having lessons from terrific musicians, how much they got paid, compared to people in the city who got much less skills. And it's worth crying over. And I think that with online technology, there's an opportunity to ramp up what peripatetic music teachers get, and just get them on some sort of scale that they deserve. And that's my comment.
Well, thank you for that. And if I just might add a quick comment on that one, because in my darker moments, I do sometimes wonder whether music education is too cheap. Now you might think, well, that's not where you should be heading. But I compare music education with the costs involved with looking after my 5 children, playing rugby, going swimming, doing gymnastics, doing football, all of which are significantly more expensive than doing music. And sometimes I wonder whether or not we're making a bit of a rod for our own back on the costings of music education. But you can argue that one out with me in a moment if you want. Yes, madam.
Hello, I'm the Master Development Officer for Craven District Council, which is a small North Yorkshire-based rural district council. I just wanted to put in a plea that there's more joined-up thinking about technology. There are lots of adults who would like music lessons in rural areas. There are lots of village halls that could potentially act as venues for you and stream. And I often feel that schools are actually completely divorced from the communities that they're in, and that there's very little interaction between the schools, the offer that schools have to give the community and the community. And that's not, I'm not criticising the schools, but I think that is a case quite often, that there isn't the interaction that there could be, and that there therefore isn't the use of all the talent that is coming into schools digitally. It doesn't go into the community at all.
Okay, and David, last word for David on this one.
Mine's a reflection and a question, if I can. First, a reflection. One of the most interesting things this afternoon was when Mark was saying at 4 o'clock in the afternoon there's this big spike and all the kids get home from school and get on to music school. And it occurred to me, it's sort of crucial really that in between lessons there is support and a space where kids can go to sort of do their own learning, as it were, either in a managed space or by being guided into different internet spaces. And it's not one for now for the panel, but it'd be interesting to see what Connect Resound are doing in terms of their instrumental teaching and then the support they're providing to the kids between lessons. But my specific question, I suppose, is for Lee. I can see how the real-time online teaching could work in a fairly formal, structured way for instrumental peri-teaching, for online orchestras. What about those more difficult, rather more subtle teaching situations? I'm thinking about teaching a classroom improvisation session. I remember, Lee, about 15 years ago, you ran a session where I was a student up at the University of York for British Pearl. Yes. You did a session on improvisation. Sure you remember it.
Yeah, I'm right back there. Back there.
You're right back there. What would you think the challenge would be of doing a session like that online would present? Would it be possible, do you think, or would it be desirable, or is that one that is really a face-to-face thing only?
Gosh, 15 years ago. Oh my gosh. Well, I think for me personally, some of these things would be quite a struggle for me personally. But I think that I plant myself in a sense squarely coming from a certain kind of background. But there's no doubt that working with what I've seen in various different places, what I've seen in amazing places in New York, particularly Manhattan School of Music, and that they're using technology really effectively to do some of these things. So I think certainly some of those things that I do quite often, and many of my community music colleagues do, this kind of improvisation thing, technology can certainly be part of that. And I think, and connecting to this idea of CPD opportunities, this idea of training, this idea of what roles can institutes of higher education who have students come in who take part on courses, is how we can provide spaces to really sort of engage in how to use the technology effectively as one part of the equation. And again, I think Abby they made some good points about look towards those folks that are really engaging with it all the time to kind of build up some pedagogy. So I think the answer is absolutely it can be used. It would need some thought, and it would be great that the younger people travelling through the courses that so many colleges of music education are providing, if we can provide and think about having some good education for that. And I would also like to connect to a conversation I had with Simon, and I think in a sense, Missy was pointing this out, about producing content that we can give away as well. I would be really excited to explore making material that we can put online, that we can give stuff away so people can get. I don't know what sort of response that was, but it's the best I got.
Right, Abby's going to have a crack at this one. Great stuff, Abby.
I'll try and do worse. I guess I'd ask why. Why would you, or not you necessarily, but why would that be appropriate? And I think it kind of comes back to the young people. Would they get a better experience in an improvisation workshop? Could we just simply replicate that? I think that's the danger of trying to think, well, this works well face-to-face, let's see if it can happen online. And I think what's more exciting is thinking about the potential for collaboration that technology can really enhance. And we've started to see this in schools internationally now. Schools, I've got a school in Manchester and a school in Australia whose students have come up with some ideas around how they can really create new music together using technology. So they've been effectively doing a sort of an online orchestra, but using YouTube, and they've been uploading them different parts, and they've been using a Coldplay song. But I think that opening up to students that technology can give them the space to be really creative and giving them some ideas around how that can happen, rather than trying to, facilitating an improvisation workshop in similar way to the online orchestra, I can imagine would be quite a difficult thing to do. But facilitating improvisation and collaboration among students and finding ways that they can do that, I think could be really, really exciting.
Well, David, you've been playful and improvisational with your use of Sonic Pi this morning, weren't you?
Yes. And
most computer coding that I know about from friends who are computer programmers, it's a collaborative activity, not an individual activity. So they're online, they're coding together, often dispersed around the world using fragments of code drawn from all over the place to create new code. There's no reason why that couldn't become an improvisational activity collaboratively online, is there? I would guess. I don't know if it's possible yet, but that's one idea. Okay, great. Can we have some more questions, please, from these lovely people? Yes, sir. Would you like to just say who you are and then ask your question? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Adrian from Arts Council England. I've got a question about, I haven't heard very much today about genres of music, and I'm just wondering what people think of the opportunity that using technology provides through transmission of lessons or connecting various groups up for dealing with a more diverse range of genres of music, and then by doing that, a more diverse range of people, whether it's non-classical, even non-Western genres of music, because I've not seen very much or heard very much about that so far today.
I'm not sure I'd just like to sort of maybe point out the Smithsonian Folkway project. Patricia Campbell has certainly been key on that in the US, and they've just got a new director in Butch Skippers who just starts there, and they've been really effective, I believe. I don't know if anyone's engaged in that collection of creating lesson plans, let's call it that for argument's sake, and really utilising their collection to make available for schools by using ethnomusicologists to create certain things. So in terms of that's kind of my response. There are some really good examples of how that has happened. I think it's very particularly American. I'm sure if you log on you'll see, but they have really tried to utilise their collection for educational purposes by bringing in expertise, both ethnomusicology and those interested in cultural diversity in music education.
And I can jump in on that one. Is that okay? Aware of some coding that's going on around New York State University, where Alex Ruffman, who's a colleague that some of us will know, who works there now, has got a group of experimental coders doing some really interesting experiments in listening to music online in a more experimental way. I mean, one of the ones that struck me was a Google API that they developed, where if you had your journey and you were travelling from York to Sandbach, where I live, you plug your destination in on your sat-nav or whatever it is, and it picks out music for you while you're on your journey from folk musicians whose regions you're travelling through. And I thought that was a beautiful use of technology to enhance listening and to help you uncover and discover new music that maybe you weren't familiar with. So there's all sorts of interesting things going on. Maybe in academia, it's one of the privileges of being able to spend a bit of time looking around and finding out about some of these things where everyone's generally speaking so busy. Okay, let's have some more questions. Let's do quick questions and quick answers. Yes, Phil. We've got 10 minutes. 10 questions. Let's go for it.
How do you see musical opportunities online for students and adults with special needs and disabilities?
Great question. Who'd like to do that one? Go for it.
I mean, it's not my area of expertise, and Philip absolutely is yours, so I think to an extent you're probably better placed to answer this. But I mean, we've heard so much today about how, almost kind of democratising music learning through technology just opens up access, and I always feel like the special educational needs sector have led in terms of accessible technology, and both in terms of what's actually used in classrooms, but also really talking about what they're doing and getting stuff out there online. And I think that these sorts of initiatives just open up music learning to students who aren't able to physically go to a place. And that accessibility to experts that might not otherwise be possible is, I think, is something that is really important. But you probably have the answer so much more than we do on this. This is your expertise.
Can we throw it back to you?
Well, I've got my timings a little bit wrong, so I've been told by Heidi that we have to draw it to a close. But this is the start of a conversation, and the whole point of this event is to bring people with an interest in these areas together. And I know that from my experience of working with NYMAZ over the last 3 years, possibly 3 years-ish, 2.5, that they're just a great bunch of colleagues who are so open to new ideas and new ways of thinking about music education. So do engage with each other, do engage with NYMAZ, with anyone on the panel. I'm sure they would be open to conversations after the event as well. So thank you very much for your questions. Can we show our appreciation for your wonderful